Okay. We're at 102 and we have a lot to cover, and I'm probably going to talk a little bit fast, but I'm going to try to be keep things pretty simple. My name is Bob Lofton. I'm one of the librarians with Plano. I normally, during non-pandemic times, work at Haggard Library. I do a lot of work in the digital creation space and with teenagers and stuff like that. Jessica, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Jessica. I'm also at the Haggard Library. I've been with Plano for about a year now. Yeah, that's me.
And Jessica's going to be doing kind of tech support for me during this session. She'll be monitoring the chat. If you look at your Zoom window, you're going to see some buttons down toward the bottom. One says raise hand and one says Q&A. I'm going to request that y'all not use either of those unless I ask, because it's a lot of places for her to monitor. If you have questions, just type them into the normal chat, which can be opened down at the bottom with the chat button. A lot of times people put questions in Q&A and then we don't see them on quickly. I may ask you to raise your hand in a couple of instances, just to get some feedback. Like right now, a couple of weeks ago, we did part one, which was kind of podcasting 101, explaining what podcasting is and whatnot. How many of you are returning from that? You can either answer in the chat or raise your hand or whatever. But yeah, I'm just curious to see who took that. John didn't. Okay. Steven's new. Okay. I thought I saw some Keela's new. Oh, cool. I thought I saw a few returning people to this. Larry didn't. Okay. Okay. Well, what we're going to do real quickly then, I don't want to cover too much of what they talked about last time, but since we do have some new people, I want to talk real quickly about what a podcast is. Obviously, it's an audio file that you can download from the internet to your phone or computer or tablet or whatever. What makes a podcast technically a podcast is the ability to subscribe to it. So there's a technology, an internet technology called RSS. Stands for really simple syndication. And I don't want to get too technical, but that is what makes a podcast subscribable. For instance, if you have your iPhone and you have your podcast app on your iPhone, or your a podcatcher app on your Android phone or whatever, or on your computer, you could enter the address of that feed, that RSS feed from your podcast, and your catcher app will scan about once a day and determine if there is a new episode of all the podcasts that you're interested in. So, I'm going to open up a document and I'm going to share my screen with y'all. And we're just going to go through it real quick since we do have a lot of new people. So bear with me here while I open this. This is the handout that I normally use when I'm teaching this in the building. And I'm going to share my screen with y'all. And here we go. Okay, so this will help me kind of give you a quick, concise definition of what a podcast is. Jessica, I'm going to ask them, can everybody see the document that I'm sharing that says Introduction to Podcasting? Are we getting affirmatives in the chat right now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, cool. All right. So, and I can send everybody this after the class, but this is just a handout. What is a podcast? It's basically like having a radio show. And this is what I call the simplified process of producing a one-person podcast. One, you got to determine the topic, obviously. It's better if you have a topic and you're not just kind of talking. Two, record the podcast. That's what we're going to be talking about today. And editing the podcast, which we're also going to to do today. We're going to edit a very simple podcast. And then finally, you're going to publish it. In order to make your podcast public so that people can subscribe to it and get it, you have to publish it to the internet. It can't just be on your computer. And the best way to do that is to get a subscription with one of a number of podcasting services that are available on the internet. And there several of them are listed on this document. One of them is called Libsyn, LIBSYN.com. There's another one called Blueberry. There's another one called Podbean. There's quite a few. People even host them on SoundCloud.com. It's pretty inexpensive to start a podcasting account. Like you can do one on Libsyn for $5 a month. But you really want to use one of those because those hosts are specially geared toward hosting podcasts. So they automatically generate that RSS feed for you so people can subscribe to your podcast. And they'll also generate a homepage for your podcast. So, if you have a domain name like Bob's Science Fiction Podcast or something like that, you can direct your domain name to the page that they build for you, and that becomes your home on the internet. So it makes it really easy for people to find you. YouTube, I get a lot of questions about hosting podcasts on YouTube. YouTube, one, will not accept an audio only file. You have to have some kind of video associated with it, even if it's a still image, which means you end up processing a video file, and it's kind of a mess and a pain. The other thing is YouTube is not really subscribable in the same way. You can subscribe to someone's account on YouTube, but you still have to go to YouTube and take the initiative of checking that person's YouTube channel for new stuff. You can't put that into a podcast app and have that automatically check for you, so that when you're like, I'm going to listen to a podcast today, and you pick up your phone and you check, it's like, oh, I see there's a new episode of the Science Fiction Podcast. And it doesn't work like that with YouTube. So publishing is a big deal. Determining a topic can be anything. I do a skateboarding podcast, and I do one on a science fiction role-playing game that I really like. And we're going to be playing with a little snippet from that today when we do some editing. It can be about anything you're interested in. Recording the podcast, obviously you need something to record it on. Most people are going to record it on a computer using some kind of editing or recording software. Technically, you could record one on your phone. If you've got a microphone on your phone, which you do because it's a phone, and some recording software, and then you could dump that onto a computer or edit it. There's even systems available on the internet for free where you just log on to their site into your account and you can record a podcast and edit it on their site. We're going to talk a little bit about that, but not too much, because I want to teach you how to actually do proper editing. All right, editing. There's kind of three main ways to go about this on your computer. If you have any kind of Macintosh computer, it probably came with the GarageBand app, and you can edit podcasts in GarageBand. The kind of top of the line audio editing, in my opinion, is Adobe Audition. It is expensive, and you have to pay a monthly subscription fee of like $20 or $25. If you just want that piece of the Adobe Creative Cloud, but it is professional level audio editing. And then there is a piece of freeware called Audacity, and Audacity is what we're going to use today because I wanted to use something you would all have easy access to. It's available for Mac, PC, and Linux. So pretty much whatever machine you're using, you will be able to download and use Audacity, and we'll look at downloading it momentarily. Talking about editing is really critical for a podcast. I normally think that if you record, say, an hour of audio, especially if you're talking to someone else and it's unscripted, you want to edit this thing ruthlessly and probably cut out anywhere from 50%, maybe up to 50%. You really want to listen to this with a listener's ear and decide whether every bit of that episode is valuable to a listener. If it's just me and my buddy and we're talking about something, we start laughing and we just get into this big giggling festival. It was fun for us, but it's not fun for a listener to hear. So you chop that stuff out, edit ruthlessly, and very important. Like anything on the internet, you can tell I teach teenagers this too. Don't put anything out that is going to immediately or in the future embarrass you or anyone else or make them mad. Podcast, I feel like they don't have quite the tendency of other things on the internet to just last forever out there, but they probably do. So really listen very critically to what you put out there. The beautiful thing about a podcast, the way we're talking about it here, is it is not live. You can chop out anything you want to. So if you say something or someone else, you talk about a topic and you're like, well, you know what, maybe I don't really want that out there on the internet. Just chop it out. Once you've thought about it a little bit, if you think, oh, you know what, maybe I could have put that in, bring it up in another episode when you've had a chance to think about it really clearly. Publishing the podcast. Okay. This is where it all happens. You've got to publish it, like I said. And I kind of explained that later or earlier. Yes, earlier. Let's talk real quick about recording. We're going to talk about microphones and software. So the most important thing that you're going to, that's going to determine how nice your podcast sounds is your microphone. If you have a crummy microphone or you're in bad recording conditions and you don't get a nice quality raw file, there's no amount of audio processing, at least for a layperson, that's going to make that audio sound good. You can run all the noise filters you want. It's still not going to sound very good. So good microphone's critical. You can use the built-in microphone on your computer, but they're usually not very good. Some people use a gaming headset, and I've actually heard some really good quality from gaming headsets. So if you've already got one of those, or your kid does, or brother, or whatever, sister, then you might try that. A typical, very good way to get started is to get a good USB microphone, and that is what I'm using right here. The link is here. It's the Audio-Technica AT2020 USB microphone. There are other brands. A popular one is called the Blue Snowball. It's kind of a round microphone. The advantage of these kind of mics is that you plug them into the computer and your recording software, in your recording software, you select that microphone, that USB source as the input source for your recording, and you're ready to go. You don't have to play with a mixing board or anything like that. It's very simple. And there are, like this microphone, I can't tell how I sound to you guys live like this, but when I record something for the library, it turns out really, really nicely. And this is like $120 microphone. They are hard to find right now. The pandemic kind of created a run on good USB microphones, but you can still get them. Now, when you're getting into this, microphones can be a very confusing topic. So I'm going to talk about this dynamic or condenser microphone with a mixer. Okay, so in a nutshell, here's the deal. This USB microphone is also a condenser microphone because it is drawing power through the copper wire that goes into the microphone, and it's using that power to do a little internal amplification of my voice. Condenser microphones are powered microphones, and they tend to be very sensitive. This one is fine for home recording. I've tried it with a really expensive one that my uncle sent me to try out, and it was so sensitive because it was powered that it picked up all the room noise and sounds throughout my house, and it just didn't work very well for me. So, but something like this or a snowball or something will work great for you. a dynamic mic is not powered. And to use a dynamic mic, you have to have some sort of audio interface. Usually it's going to be a mixing board. You plug the dynamic mic into the mixing board, and the mixing board plugs into the computer, and that is your source of audio input. Now, why would you want to do either of those instead of just getting a USB mic? If you're going to be interviewing people in person, you can't really use USB mics because you can only plug your software will only listen to one of them at a time. Now, there is kind of a complicated workaround for that. Like if you had 3 USBs plugged into your computer, some machines will let you create something called a composite device that allows you to listen to all 3 at once. But that's kind of sketchy. Really, if you're gonna do multiple people in the same room, you want some kind of audio interface where you can plug microphones into that, and then that one thing goes into your computer. I'm going to show you some pictures real quick. All right. The first one is this is the back of a microphone. And this could be a dynamic or a condenser microphone, but this area right here, the connecting point is called an XLR. It uses an XLR cable, and these are the kind of cables you see plugged into microphones. So it's 3-pronged. I'll show you what the cable looks like. There's the cable. So you've got prongs on one side and holes on the other. If you hear about an XLR microphone, whether it's a condenser or dynamic mic, that's what they're talking about. And then when you go to plug this into a mixing board, this is what a mixing board looks like. This is a small one. You can see up here in the upper left corner, there are 2 XLR inputs. So you would be able to plug a microphone into this one and a microphone into this one, and then plug the entire mixer into your computer and record. And the nice thing about this is it allows you down here at the bottom, you can adjust the relative volume levels for each of the speakers. So if somebody's really loud, you can turn them down, or if somebody's not very loud, turn them up, and you can equalize everything real nice. But that's essentially how a mixer works. It's more, there's a lot of buttons and knobs and stuff, but that's basically what it does. It takes multiple audio inputs and combines them into one that goes out to your recording device, in this case, a computer. All right. And there's also a thing called a digital audio recorder. We're not going to go into those a whole lot. Editing software, I already talked about Macs and PCs and GarageBand and Adobe Audition and Audacity, which we're going to be using today. We'll keep going through this a little bit. If you are going to upload a podcast to one of these services, say you've created a podcast in Audacity and you've saved that Audacity project file, you can't upload that because it won't, there's nothing that'll read it except Audacity. So you're going to want to export it usually as an MP3 file. Some people will export it as a WAV, a WAV file. They're much, much bigger files, and for spoken word, you don't really need that high a quality. So MP3 is just fine. And like I said, I'm going to send this to y'all, but I've got links for some of the podcast hosts here, as well as some podcasting resources on the web. Okay, I've talked a lot and real fast. Jessica, do we have any questions at this point?
So we do actually.
Okay.
We did get a question about how does a mixer connect to a PC?
Great question. Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. Give me just a second. Hi, I'm back. Okay, connecting a mixer to a PC or a Mac. So a lot of mixers that you buy now, you can do it 2 ways with them. One is just by USB. So there's a USB cable that comes with the mixer. You plug it into the back of the mixer and you plug it into your computer. And then in your editing software, when you open that, you will look for your audio input hardware preference. And you will see a list, perhaps a list of different inputs that could be used. Like if you had a built-in microphone, it may say built-in microphone. It may also say mixer, or the mixer may say USB source or something like that. You pick that and it brings it in. The other way you can do it is if your computer has a microphone jack, just like the same size you would plug headphones into or something, but it's not a headphone jack, a microphone jack. Those are disappearing from a lot of computers. My new MacBook Pro doesn't have one, which bums me out. There are some ports on top of the mixer called main mix, and there's a right and a left channel, and you get a cable that is a Y cable. So you've got a right and a left. You plug them in, and those wires go up, and they connect, and they combine into one small connector that you plug into the that microphone jack on your computer. So that's how you do that. Other questions? I see one new message. The document will be included in the email. I'll make sure that this document comes to you. Yeah, absolutely. It's not a Word document. It's going to be a PDF. Any other questions right now?
It looks like we also have a question if your class like this, if it is taught for teenagers as well.
Yeah, actually, it is. These classes that we do online, frankly, we don't police them. Like if a teenager joined, that would be fine. We're not really we didn't market this particular one to teens, but if a teenager shows up there, that's fine. Normally I would teach this to adults, or I might have a teen class in the library at Haggard or at Par in the digital creation space. And I actually kind of like doing it better this way because I can have more people online than squeezing, more than 4 people into those little labs. There's something in Q&A here. Okay. Any other questions right now?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. So that's a lot. You're going to come up with other questions. Please go ahead and type them into the chat as they come up. Jessica, just please feel free to interrupt me if a question comes up that you want me to answer. So I'm going to share my screen again. All right. Now we are looking at the page for Audacity. This is where you're going to go to read about the Audacity software and to download it. I've already got it on my computer. I'm not going to download it, but I will click the download link and you can see online safety when downloading Windows, Mac, Linux. You can even get the source code for this. It's basically open source.
Bob, are you able to make your screen bigger?
I will, yeah. Thank you for that. I'm going to stretch this. This is about as big as I can go. Let me just tell you, the link, in case you can't see it, is Audacity Team. That's audacityteam.org. Go to that page and it'll give you all the information with documentation and whatnot about Audacity. All right. Now, I'm going to pretend we've already downloaded Audacity. And again, questions, any old time, break in. So I'm going to I'm going to minimize this window. And here is Audacity. And I'm going to make the window a little bigger. I'm going to drag my face away so I can see what I'm doing. Okay. Audacity, I've got it on a Mac here at home. It looks basically the same on a PC and probably on Linux, as far as I know. It is free, and it is not. It doesn't have the most beautiful user interface. Like if you were using Adobe Audition or even GarageBand, the user interface looks a little less technical. It's made a little bit more friendly, but this one's not too bad. What we're going to do today, in the next probably 20 minutes, I'm going to really be going through this fast so we can do questions at the end. We're going to create a very short podcast that has 3 tracks. One track is going to be an introduction and thank you at the end. The other track is going to be some content that I recorded earlier from my own podcast. And then the other track, the third track, is going to be some intro and outro music. So we have really simple goals today. I'm going to show you how to record something into a track using your microphone. I'm going to show you how to import existing sound files into different tracks. I'm going to show you how to split those tracks so that, like, if there's a section you don't want, you can delete it. You can move things around, shuffle them around, and all that. And then I'm going to show you how to blend the volume of different parts. So, like, if you have intro music, maybe the intro music goes up, and then as you start welcoming people, it goes down, and then there's some silence in the voice track and it goes back up. And then as people start talking, it gradually goes back down again, just to make it sound professional. And I'll show you how to export this. Let's take a quick look at the menus up here, though. And again, it's small. If but just do the best you can to see this. I've got this window active. You say it says Audacity here. You have a lot of the same kinds of menus you would have in any other piece of software. You've got a file menu where you can open projects and export and import and do new projects and stuff like that. An edit menu for copying and pasting. Select is different. View, different. Transport. When you're dealing with audio, a lot of times you'll hear people talk about the transport controls. And it took me forever to have the energy to look up what that meant. All it means is, like, really is the controls you would see on a tape deck or a CD player. Play, pause, fast forward, all that. Those are generally the transport controls. You've got one here for tracks, and we'll see what a track looks like in a minute. So generate, we are not going to play with at all. We are going to use the effects a little bit today. Analyze, we're not going to use. Tools, we're not going to use. So it's going to be very simple. Now, looking at the screen here, up here at the upper left-hand corner, you've got pause, play, stop, forward, or reverse, forward, and the big red button that is record. You've got some tools here. These are tools you're going to use pretty frequently. You've got the select tool. That is important. The envelope tool, also important. And this one here, this little arrow that goes left and right, time shift. Time shift sounds like you're playing with time and space. You're really not. It just means you're taking a section of video or of audio and moving it back and forth in the timeline, changing its position where it shows up. Over further to the right, there's an area that says click to start monitoring. Monitoring means you can hear your own voice while you're speaking. Generally, you don't want that because it's very confusing. There's usually a little lag time. Keep it turned off. The other problem is, if you don't use headphones, your own microphone is going to hear your own voice coming out of the speakers from the monitor, and you're going to get feedback and echo, and it's going to sound really weird. Some of these other things I'm not going to really cover today, just in the interest of time. Here, you see it says AT2020 USB. That is my audio input source. I could pick my Logitech Brio, my MacBook Pro microphone, and a couple of other sources, but I'm going to leave it on my USB mic. Recording, mono or stereo. And then I have my MacBook Pro speakers selected as the output source, or the output for audio, so I can hear it when I play it back. If I had headphones plugged in, the headphones would show up and so forth. Do we have questions at this point, Jessica?
Not yet.
Okay, cool. So we're going to pretend that we're making a podcast about a science fiction, about science fiction. It's going to be Bob's Science Fiction Podcast. The first thing I'm going to do is just record an intro. Before I record the intro, though, I'm going to go to my Mac's system preferences, and you could find these kind of preferences on the PC as well, and go to my sound preferences. And I see my input volume which is my microphone. And I know it's my microphone because when I tap it, it shows up. I've got my mic volume set at about 60%, 55, 60%, 64 actually. That's fine. I've tested it. But if you're not getting enough volume out of your microphone, like if you're really quiet, look at your preferences, and your input volume is probably turned way, way down. All right. Clear my voice so I can sound official and click record. You're listening to Bob's Science Fiction Podcast, a podcast about science fiction. Okay, pretty simple. I'm going to record that again, though. I want you to look up here where my pointer is, and you're going to see, as I speak, you're going to see a little graph bumping around, and you're going to see also that it's bumping way up into the red at some points. And I'm not surprised, because if you look down here at the recording, this graphical representation of my voice is called the waveform. And you can see right here, the waveform is really big. That means I'm recording too loud, way too loud. I'm going to go up to edit, and I'm just going to do undo record. Got rid of it. I'm going to go back to system preferences, sound, and I'm going to move my volume down a little bit. Generally, when you're recording, you don't have to record that loud. Okay. I'm getting hoarse. My voice isn't going to sound as beautiful as it usually does. You're listening to the Science Fiction Podcast, a podcast about science fiction and related topics. Okay, now you can see the waveform is much smaller. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to listen to it by clicking the play button. You're listening to the Science Fiction Podcast. Actually, let me unshare my screen real quick so that I can set it so that you can hear the audio as well. All right. Share screen, share sound. Sorry about that, y'all. And share. Okay, now you should be able to hear this. Jessica, will you just chime in once I hit play and tell me if you're able to hear it? You're listening to the Science Fiction Podcast, a podcast.
Yeah, we can hear it. It's a little quiet.
Great. Okay, cool. So I've got my intro here. I'm going to drag some music into a track below that in just a moment. But I already know that I'm going to want some music playing before this starts. So what I'm going to do is click the time shift tool, the right and left arrow. And I'm going to put it here above that section, which it's highlighted in kind of a darker gray. And I'm just going to move it so that it's maybe 7 seconds into this. Okay.
Bob, yeah. You're not sharing your screen with us.
Oh, you can't see
the one that you're editing on.
Okay, hang on. I'm sorry, that was the wrong screen. Sorry, y'all. Stop share. I picked the wrong screen. Just a sec.
And is this a good time? I did get a question as well. Are you able to adjust the recording level from Audacity, or do you have to go into your system preferences?
So you can adjust it in Audacity, and you can adjust it afterward, which we're going to talk about. The problem with adjusting it afterward is if you record it and it's booming and it's clipping, which is what it means when it bumps up into the red, even though you reduce the volume after you've recorded it, it's still going to sound like it's clipping. It's just quieter when it's clipping. So you really want to test this before you do your main recording that you're going to want to keep. I mentioned the system preferences mainly because, one, everybody needs to go ahead and know where to find those before you start working with the software. And two, that's a place where things are often askew. Especially like if you work in a public library and somebody's been messing with the preferences before you teach the class, and you need to go back in and make sure everything is set about right. And just to let you know, when I say I'm going to skip over something in this, there's a full course on Audacity in lynda.com, one of the resources we make available for free. And I'm going to point you toward that at the end. So it's not that I don't care. It's that we've got about an hour to do this, and I can't cover every single piece of it. I just want you guys to get the basics and a couple of little strategies. Okay. Now, there is, I'm going to play this again so you can actually see the thing working. I should be sharing my screen now, right, Jessica?
Yes, we can see it now.
Okay, good. All right, here we go again. So it's going to be 7 seconds of silence and then my voice. The thing moving up at the top is called the playhead. You're listening to the Science Fiction Podcast, a podcast about science fiction and related topics. And you can still hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, we have the time shift tool on. I'm going to go back to the selection tool up here. Click that. It's really easy to get rid of stuff you don't want in Audacity. All I'm going to do is highlight the section that I don't want with the selection tool. And I'm going to click delete. Now, when I click delete, it's going to shift things a little bit. There's a way to keep it from shifting, but again, that's in the lynda.com course. So I hit delete. And then at the end, I'm going to do the same thing so that we don't have a bunch of junk just sitting there. Okay. Now, let's talk about the music track. I have this electronic music file. I'm going to show you where it is. It's a friend of mine who does electronic tracks, and I'm just going to take this, and there is an import feature in the file menu, but in this case, I'm just going to drag it and drop it. And you can see here it's importing that MP3 file. All right. Now, it's a long track, and Audacity is trying to show me the whole podcast as it exists right now, but that's way too much. And for one thing, up at the top, I can barely see mine. So what you can do is go up here to the upper right-hand corner. You see some magnifying glasses. There's a plus and a minus magnifying glass for zoom in, zoom out. I'm just going to click the plus a few times. Now you can see my track here that I've recorded and the music track. What I am going to do now is we're not going to need the whole music track. So I'm going to reduce this again, and I'm going to just highlight almost all of it, all of the music track, and click delete. And scroll back to the beginning. And that's a little bit more manageable for me. I don't have to constantly be zooming in and out so much. Now, so let's see what this sounds like. I can tell you right now, the sound is going to be really loud on the music. Oops. Well, it's supposed to be loud. Hang on. So you can see the music is really bumping up here into the red. And that's not a surprise, because you can see that it's really filling up that waveform. Okay, we don't want that. We want it to be a lot quieter. This is where you're going to use the envelope tool. This is very different from the way you do it in either Audition or GarageBand. So I'm going to select this track by just clicking on it, and you can see it highlighted the track. And then I'm going to click this tool that says envelope tool. And what I can do now is I can place these little points, and I don't know if you're going to be able to see them, but I'm going to place a point right here and right here and right here and right here. And these points allow me to change the volume and change the way the volume raises and lowers. And I can decrease the overall volume as well, which is going to be absolutely necessary with this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here getting it perfect. I just want you to see that you use the envelope tool and these little points to shape the way the sound is going to sound. Okay, we're not getting into the red now. That's good. You're listening to the Science Fiction Podcast. Okay. A podcast about science fiction and related topics. Yes, we are. Okay. Cool. Now, for right now, I'm going to leave the rest of this music file here. If I were using Audacity, or excuse me, Audition or GarageBand, I might chop some of it up right now, but this is very important to know. Audacity uses what is called destructive editing, which means if I chop something out right now from either of these files, or I apply an effect to it or something like that, that change is made. Now, you can go up and to use the undo button under edit, but if you get if you get too far into this and like, you've chopped out some music and now you want it, it's too late, it's gone. Whereas those other two applications, it doesn't really destroy them. It doesn't change that base file that's being worked with. It just kind of hides parts of it. Okay, so we've got an intro and music. There are some buttons over here for each track. One of them is called mute, right? So we've got a mute button. I'm going to mute the music track. I'm going to select the top up. I've still got the envelope tool on. I don't want it. I'm turning it off. I'm just going to do the select tool. I'm going to pick the top track is selected, and I'm going to go out to here. When you're moving around these tracks, if you click your select tool inside the track itself, you can see it's going to move this little triangle here. That's where your recording is going to start. So if you want to move this around, like, and say I want to record right here, I just click inside there and I click record. We're going to do an outro. Thanks for listening to the Science Fiction Podcast. We'll be back next week with more science fiction goodness. Okay. This little green guy up here that says timeline options, if you put your mouse over it and you click that, it says enable quick play. I have quick play enabled, and that means I can bring that, I can put my cursor here and that green triangle shows up. And if I just click, it's going to play from that point. Thanks for listening to the Science Fiction Podcast. We'll be back next week with more science fiction goodness. Okay, I think I'm talking a lot louder now because that was clipping again. I'm not going to fix it because I just want to get through this so you guys get what you need. But what I am going to do is go over here and I'm going to select, well, first thing I'm going to do is click the time shift, and I'm going to move that over a little bit, okay? And you can see when I did that recording, even though I recorded way back here, it created basically an empty recording for all of that time. So what I'm going to do now is click select, and I'm going to cut it right here because you could hear me kind of inhaling right here, and that didn't sound good. And delete. And then I'm going to go back to time shift and I'm going to move it over a little bit. And we'll play with this again in just a minute. Okay, finally, our content. The actual podcast. So I'm going to take a file that I created yesterday called test.mixdown, and I'm going to drag it, and it's going to put it in a third track. So you can see it right here. All right. And I don't need very much of it. So I'm going to select almost all of it and delete it. there's a bar down here at the bottom. You might notice that that's what I've been pulling around to shift around in it. All right, I'm going to zoom in again. And let me zoom out a little bit. Okay, so you can see I need about this much space. That's about how much content I need to fill up that space for this project. So I think what I'm going to do is just time shift this over a little bit. And then I'm going to select about this much and delete a little bit more. I think you guys see where I'm going with this, but I'm going to stop briefly since we have 13 minutes left. Theoretically, I can go a little bit longer, but are there any more questions right now, Jessica?
Not at this time.
Okay, good. All right. Okay, so we have these files here, and I am going to just play it and see what it sounds like. Oops, I've got this muted, sorry. You're listening to the Science Fiction Podcast, a podcast about science fiction and related topics.
Talk about a symbiotic relationship between.
Okay, now you can hear my friend Jeff talking and me. Yeah, it's a great anthology. I don't know if we've mentioned. Okay, I certainly don't want the music playing the whole time we're speaking. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to time shift this over. I'm going to try to do this real fast so you'd actually see what I would do. I'm going to move that a little bit. I'm going to select the music track, click envelope again. I'm going to put a couple more points here. I'm going to bring it up a little bit, right? And then I'm going to bring it down to here. And then I am going to grab the selection tool. I'm going to go here. And I've got it selected. I'm going to go up here to the edit menu and click cut. Oops, sorry. I need to select this whole thing, actually. One moment, please. Okay. I'm going to select. And because it's so small, you can't really see that it's selecting it, but it is. And then I'm going to click. Thought of a better way to do this. Okay. I think I can put the cursor right here, go to edit, clip boundaries, and split. Okay. Now I've split these two. I'm going to use time shift and just drag this last one out of the way for now. And I'm going to select this clip right here, the very end of it. And I'm going to go up to effect, and I'm going to go down to fade out. Fade out will actually make it fade down to 0. Now let's listen and see what it sounds like. You're listening to the Science Fiction Podcast, a podcast about science fiction and related topics.
Talk about a symbiotic relationship between creatures on a planet that I thought.
Okay, so you get the idea. It could be done better than that. I'm kind of rushing through this. And I do want to leave time for questions at the end. So I'm just going to tell you what I would do at the end of this. I would do kind of exactly the opposite of, or the reverse of what I did at the beginning. I would time shift my outro over a little bit. I would pull the music over, and as the actual content draws to a close, I would use the envelope tool and the fade in tool under effects to gradually bring the music back up and then back down a little bit. You would then hear the outro, And at the end of that, the music would go up, play for maybe 4 seconds, and then fade down to 0, and everything's over. Boom, you're done. Questions now. I see something in Q&A, Jessica.
Yes. So we do have a question about if there is a way to remove like pops from the recording or in the audio.
Pops?
Yeah, like sounds that you don't want in there.
There are. Okay. So this is a big topic in audio. Like I said, if your recording is full of background noise, like mine is going to be today because I'm working at home and our yard guy is mowing the lawn outside. There is a noise filter on Audacity, and what you can do, if you can find, like, say, let me just get the selection tool. Say this section right here that I've selected. Say that none of this waveform is here, but there's just like a background noise. What you can do is select that and then run the noise filter on this, and it will remove that noise from everything in that track. The problem with that is a lot of times the frequencies that it's removing also exist in the sound that you want to leave in there. So noise reduction is not a great way to do this. The best way to do it is to get good sound in the first place. Now, as far as removing, say someone's coughed, right? There's a couple ways to do that. One, you could take, say, I'm going to highlight this space right here, and you see that peak. Say that that's a cough. You could go in with the envelope tool and like do a really quick reduction down to basically 0, and then a quick increase in volume, and it would get rid of that. Okay. Or you might hear just a little bit because envelope doesn't actually take it all the way down to 0. You could just chop this out. In this particular application, if I highlight this and I click delete, it doesn't leave a space there though. So the timing changes, right? If I click delete here, it pulled those two things together, but maybe I don't want them together because I've already adjusted other things in other tracks and everything gets out of line. So I'm going to undo that. Up here in the edit menu, there are some other options. Let me see if I can remember where that is. What you could do is you can do split delete. So let me see what happens when I do that. Okay. When I did split delete, it actually split these two chunks here into, well, 2 chunks. And it left this one where it was. So it is in the same, all of this is in the same spot in the timeline that it was before. Now that brings up an interesting topic because now you've got 2 things and maybe you want these to be connected. What you can do is just select all of those and go back up here to clip boundaries. Let's see, where is that? Oh, I'm sorry, edit, clip boundaries, and join. And you're going to see that blank space is going to disappear. It's just going to be a line there. Okay. So now we've chopped out that cough or whatever. Does that help? Do we have any other questions or comments about that?
Not about that.
Okay. Any other questions, period?
Yes. So instead of chopping out the music like you did, is there a way that you could fade it out and then just fade it back in?
You can. So it depends on the software you're using. Audacity, when you use the envelope tool to fade something down, Audacity does not allow you to fade it to 0. Like that's one restriction in this software that I'm not crazy about. It's a little more limited. So you saw like in that up here where I'm looking, I first used the envelope tool to kind of shape this and get the volume where I wanted it. And then I actually selected this chunk at the end and I ran the fade out effect on it so that it would actually fade it all the way down to 0. Now, you could do that. I don't think you could do that without chopping the two apart. I haven't tried that. The other thing is really, if in this whole space that I just highlighted, say the whole middle of your podcast, if you don't want music there at all anyway, you might as well just chop it out, because even though there's a couple of reasons, but one is, even though maybe you've reduced the volume to 0, the information is still there. And the information is going to increase the size of the file that you're going to upload and that people are going to have to download. So that's another reason to not do it that way. But I would say experiment for sure. Other questions?
So we did get a couple of questions about recommendations that you have for software. Is that something that might be included on your document?
It is. But so software, again, if you're on a Macintosh, your options are GarageBand, which may already be on your Mac. And there is a lynda.com course on how to use GarageBand to record a podcast. It's great. I used it for a long time before I splurged and got Adobe Creative Cloud that I pay for every month. There is Adobe Audition, which is really good. I would say it's a little better than Audacity, but again, you have to pay for it and it's not cheap. And then there's Audacity, and there are some others, but those are kind of the three that I usually think of. So yeah, those are, and those are all listed on the handout. Other questions?
I think we have time for maybe one more. We have, how do you equalize the volume on multiple tracks?
How do you equalize the volume on multiple tracks? So using Audacity to do that, there's a thing called compression, and you're going to want to look into compression on the lynda.com course on Audacity. Normally, what you would do is, I usually think of compression as being within one track. So say this track down here, which is me and my friend Jeff. Jeff has a really quiet voice. If I run compression on it, it's going to reduce the top volume of everything, but it's going to lift his volume up. So that helps equalize those two, the two speakers that are on that one track. Now, if you want to do that across multiple tracks, I'm not sure compression will work across multiple tracks. You may have to use the envelope to sort of manually manipulate the volume levels that way. Let me, before I take any other questions, I do want to show you how to export. So we've got here, it is an Audacity project file. I can go over to the file menu and click export. Export is MP3, WAV, a bunch of other stuff. I'm going to export as an MP3. I'm going to call this SF podcast. It's going to go on my desktop. There's a bunch of stuff down here about, its quality and everything. I'm not going to worry about that right now. I'm just going to click save. Your tracks will be mixed down and exported as one stereo file. I click OK. And finally, there's a chance to put some metadata in to describe that file. I click OK. And it works on it. It's really fast because I have a fast computer, and also because it was a short podcast. It will take longer if you have a longer podcast. And then it put the file on my desktop, SF Podcast MP3. I can play it. Okay. You're listening to the science fiction. So that is the file that you would upload to your podcast host. Other questions? I can go a little bit longer if we need to. I don't know if you can, Jessica.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, so other questions?
Yeah. Let's see. Do you need mixers if you have a USB mic?
So a USB mic, if you have a USB mic, you don't need a mixer if it's just going to be you talking. If you want it, the time that you would use a mixer is if you have multiple people that you want to record at the same time on multiple microphones. You can't really do that with USB microphones. And if you put one USB microphone in the middle of a table and everybody starts talking, it's going to pick everything up. But even a good one, it's going to sound like y'all are at the bottom of a well. It's not going to sound very good. Really, you want everybody to have their own microphone. And for that, you really need a mixer. There's also a thing called a USB audio interface. I've got one sitting right here. Let me show you what it looks like. This is a small one, but it has ports for 2 XLR microphones. You plug the microphones into that, and then it has a USB cable that goes to my computer. And it works great. You can use a condenser mic because it will send power through phantom power to the condensers, to condenser mic. And it's real simple. The drawback, the simplicity is the nice thing. The drawback is it's not a mixing board. So you don't get to play with the high, medium, and low frequencies or have any of the other advantages a mixing board would have. Other questions?
We do have another recommendation type question.
Okay.
About, do you recommend different types of products for different types of podcasts or different types of recording projects?
So what I'm not sure what products we're referring to. I can speak in general terms. Again, the most important thing is your microphone. You don't need one that costs hundreds of dollars. If you're going to use a USB microphone, just make sure you get a pretty good one, that, like the Audio-Technica AT2020, which is hard to find right now. The Blue Snowball is pretty good. The Blue Yeti is better. So those are good USB mic options. As far as other mics, like condensers and dynamic mics, you would plug into a mixing board. And the mixing board itself, there are so many options. I have this big mic here that I got several years ago. I think you can't really see it, right? It's the Rode Procaster. It's a dynamic mic. It uses the XLR cables that I showed y'all. It plugs into my mixing board. It sounds really good. The truth is, for what I do, it doesn't sound any better than the USB microphone I'm using. And when I'm not hoarse, my voice sounds really good over both of them. So there's that. But as far as other products, I mean, that's about it. You know, the things to consider are, is the podcast just going to be you? Are you going to be interviewing or talking with friends in person? Or are you going to be doing interviews over Skype or something like that? Because that's a whole different can of worms. Like if you want to, if it's just you on your end, but you're going to have a partner in England or something, which I do, then we talk over Skype or Google Meet or something. And I have some software on my computer for it's Mac. It's called Audio Hijack, and it records all of that and saves it as an MP3 file. And that's what I use in the podcast. Another option I want to mention to y'all, there are a couple of services that have started up that all of this happens online, the editing and everything. One of them is called Zencaster, and one is called TriCast. It's TRYCA.st. And these are, it's almost like having a virtual mixing board on the internet. So like my partner on one of my podcasts is across town. I send him a link to the TriCast recording session. He's got his microphone. It runs a test, and then we can talk on TriCast. And wherever TriCast is, Sweden or someplace, it allows us to talk. but it records the audio locally on your browser on the fly, and then it uploads that file as you're talking. It kind of has a second channel where it uploads that high quality audio file to their servers. And when you're done, it actually has a track for you and a track for your partner and whoever else, and they're all synced up, and you can do some editing there, or you can download them and dump them into Audacity or whatever. But the nice thing about that is sometimes the quality that you record like locally from a Skype conversation isn't very good because it's clicky and it has internet interference and stuff. But since everybody's voice is recorded simultaneously and locally using these systems, you're getting a much more pristine recording of everybody. I've kind of gone off the deep end with that, but yeah, those it depends on what kind of podcast you want to do, really. Other questions? I'm going to stop screen sharing, by the way. I'm back. Yay. What about Anchor?
I'm not seeing any other questions at this time.
Okay, I see over in the chat, what about Anchor? Does he not recommend that platform? So Anchor is another like web-based thing, as you know, and they were recently bought by Spotify, and Anchor is fine. All of these web-based things have the advantage of simplicity. They also have the advantage of having sometimes kind of a built-in social media element where you can form relationships with other podcasters easily. That's very true on Anchor. People can call in to your Anchor thing and leave you messages, and you can answer them, like all sorts of stuff like that. So that stuff's really cool. And I've got nothing against those. The point of this class is to show you how to do it the hard way, but it's not really that hard. It's time consuming. But it's also like the way to, if you really want to learn how to edit audio, you're not going to do it on Anchor. You're going to want to have some software and play with it. But yeah, I used to think that the Anchor podcast didn't sound very good, but I think it was because the people I was listening to didn't have good microphones. If you're editing music, is there a way to show the beats in a measure? Not on Audacity. That requires other kinds of software. For instance, if you're on a Mac, GarageBand will, you can adjust the beats per minute and all that kind of stuff, the tempo. There's other software that's more expensive called Ableton. One of them is called Ableton Live. It's like professional level music editing and creation. Like you could actually create a symphony on that software without having a single instrument or even a keyboard. You could do it all by the mouse and keypad. But yeah, that's not any of the things that we've been talking about. All right, I'm looking around here. Okay, I'm okay. There's a few other questions. Jessica, do you need to leave?
No, I am good.
Okay, we still got 10 attendees, and I thought, well, let's just cover these questions because they're good questions.
Yeah, that's good.
So you had said in the beginning of the class, I mentioned the need to find a host. These hosts give you the ability to choose where to publish your podcast after you've completed the audio. Okay, so here's the way publishing works. I have an account on Libsyn. I upload my file. As it's uploading, it gives me a chance to write, like it's almost like a blog post about that. And then when I hit publish, it's published. People can go to my page on Libsyn, like bobspage.libsyn.com or whatever, and they can use it there. They can download it from there. They can get my RSS feed from there. When you're talking about publishing at different places, what you're really talking about is submitting the URL of your RSS feed, your podcast feed, to that service. So for instance, if you want your podcast to show up in the Apple Podcasts index? Well, you set up an account with Apple for free, whatever, and or use your Apple Music app or something on your computer. And there's a link that says submit podcast. And you open that and you type in some stuff about your podcast and you give them the RSS feed. And then you hit submit. In a few days, they will have had a chance to review your podcast feed. I'm sorry about the noise outside. They will have had a chance to review your podcast feed and probably approve it. And at that point, every day, Apple, away in California or wherever they happen to be, their server, every day, it's going to look at your RSS feed. And if that feed, which is just a page of gobbledygook on the server that gets updated when you create a new episode, if there's information about a new episode in the feed, then that new episode shows up in the Apple Podcast Index. So Apple's not actually storing a podcast for you. It's not publishing a podcast for you. It is providing pointers to your already existing podcast. And the Apple Podcast system and there's a Google Podcast Index too, are probably the ones that most people use the most. So that's how it works. Those places don't host your podcast and they don't publish it. Your host publishes it. Those other places just make it easier for people to find it. Okay, let's see. So then earlier, Keela said, how do we publish the recording on iTunes? Well, that explains that actually. Yeah, you have to submit your podcast to iTunes or Apple Podcasts for inclusion in their index, and then it will show up there. All right. Stephen says bye. Jill asked, what about WavePad Editor? I'm not familiar with WavePad Editor, so I'm afraid no comment. Andrew, right. I was asking about other microphones for podcasting and other recording projects. So that was for recommendations. Again, simple podcast, USB mic. It's done. It's you talking. It's you talking to your friend on Skype or TriCast or something. Anything else, like, you're really going into the rabbit hole there with mixing boards and different microphones and stuff like that. When the library is open, and it is open, I'm not sure if we're letting people into the digital creation spaces right now. We might be. We have mixers and microphones, and you can actually go in there, like make an appointment to go use those spaces at Haggard or Parr Library, and you check out the gear there for use in the lab, and you plug it into the computer, and you can learn how to use it. So that way you're not kind of flying blind when you're trying to decide what to buy. That's a great question. Like, new podcasters, I was like, what kind of microphone should I get? There's a million choices. All right. Other questions. Let's see what's in Q&A. I'm using Zoom to record 4 people in different locations, each using USB mic, then importing the file to Audacity. It has seemed thus far to be okay. Is there a situation where I should be using Zencastr or TriCast? Okay, instead. The difference between those two is, and Zoom potentially, is the quality of the recording. If you're happy with the quality of the recording on Zoom, then there's no reason to change. Do you have links to cover copyright of your content? So my content on my podcast, I just have a copyright statement on the podcast page that says, everything in here that I created, it's copyright by me. I don't use other people's intellectual content without their permission. So like my friend who lets me use his music, well, he's a friend here locally, and he lets me use it, and we've got an agreement, no big deal. But I don't, I don't grab The Weekend or something like that and use it. I hope that answers the question. All right. Any other questions? We got 8 people left. Anything else? I don't see any other questions. If that's it, y'all, we'll call it a day. I really appreciate y'all participating in the class. Hope you got something out of it. I will make sure that you get the handout that has some information on it. I really need to update it for the kind of online systems that are available now. But yeah, other than that, I'm going to click end, and everybody just have a great day. I would love to hear about it if you do a podcast, and just, I'm going to type my email in here. If you have any other questions, holler at me. I'll do my best to answer them. Okay. Bye.